So, as we well know, Tisha B'Av will begin this Monday night and Tuesday. It's the only other 25-hour fast day. And historically, the reason for the day is that, according to tradition, both temples, first and second, were destroyed on this ninth day of Av. The first by the Babylonians in 586 BCE, and the second by the Romans in 70 CE. Now, were they both actually destroyed on this same day? Well, nobody really knows, but it was very close for sure. And the rabbis decided to telescope the two destructions into one day of mourning. I think they were very wise, because simply how many days of mourning can a community endure? You've got to gain control of it. It marks the same thing. First and Second Temple mark the same kind of loss. A loss of sovereignty, exile, death, destruction, enslavement, humiliation of a nation. In our tradition, we focus on the second destruction much more than we do on the first. One reason, of course, is simply that the second destruction took place during the rabbinic period. And so obviously the rabbis were going to focus on that which they literally lived through and experienced. Another was because the second destruction resulted in a 2,000-year exile, and the first was much more short-lived. The return to the land was in less than 100 years, and we established a temple there and sovereignty. But after the second destruction, nothing until 1948. So that's the focus, the destruction of the temple and the rebellion against Rome in the year 70. How do historians interpret these events? Right? They're not there to give a religious explanation to it. So the historians point out that the rebellion was fueled by radical messianic elements combined with radical nationalists. They had no chance of actual success against Rome. It's Rome, the superpower of that period of time. But when you combine radical nationalism with radical messianism, you leave the real world and you believe in a supernatural intervention that will bring you victory. The rabbis, they're not there to give an historical explanation. They're there to interpret religiously, psychologically. So they saw it differently. First of all, they have to deal with the fact that God allowed it. He allowed it to happen, or even brought it about in some interpretations. So the rabbis bring up many different suggestions on how we should understand these tragic events. They ask this question: what could the people of Israel have possibly done to either bring it about or deserve it? There's a very big difference. To deserve it is, it's a direct punishment. You did this, I'm going to punish you. To allow it to happen is, well, it's not a punishment, but this is the situation you put yourself in. You brought it about because of mistakes you made. It's not that you deserve it, it's that you brought it about. And they ask the following question: is the covenant still intact after the destruction and the exile, or is it God's rejection of the people of Israel? So they had to deal with those two questions. The first temple, they explained, was destroyed because the people of Israel had strayed from the worship of the one true God. Jeremiah tells us that. Ezekiel tells us that. So they ran after other gods. They worshiped other gods, and they were punished for it. The second temple could not use that as an explanation. First of all, there were no prophets anymore, and the problem of idolatry and worship of foreign gods, it was over. There was no more idolatry. There was no more paganism amongst the people of Israel. So the rabbis had to come up with a different explanation. And the explanation they came up with is this concept called sinat chinam, translated as baseless hatred or excessive hatred. You can have a reason to not like somebody, but why transmit it into a hatred, a burning hatred? And it was one Jew for another. It wasn't hatred of Rome. There was good reason to hate Rome, but one Jew for another. Did that mean punishment for that baseless, causeless hatred? Was the destruction of the temple and the exile? Again, that seems a bit radical, a bit unjust, a bit exaggerated. Rather, we can take it in this way: an explanation of why the rebellion came about and why it failed, rather than seeing it as a direct punishment of the people of Israel by God. So you have that in the rabbinic literature, a direct punishment by God, that he brings the Romans to punish the people for their baseless hatred. But when you read it carefully, it seems more like an explanation of why it happened rather than a direct punishment from God. So what is baseless hatred? What is this sinat chinam concept? It's not just hating one's fellow Jews because he or she disagrees, has different customs, but it goes further than that. It means considering them to be your actual enemy, that your fellow Jew is the enemy of the nation. This led to such internal conflicts that the nation was too divided to resist a power like Rome. It also meant that it couldn't think straight. It couldn't analyze. It couldn't consider. They were too consumed with anger and hatred towards each other that they didn't understand the world around them. So it really was an absurd decision to go to a war with a superpower like Rome. It means that it wasn't Rome who was too strong. It's that we had so weakened ourselves with internal conflict that we acted almost suicidally or lost a chance for some type of victory that could have led to a compromise with Rome. Remember, we did defeat Greeks. They were a superpower as well. But we didn't really defeat the Greeks on Hanukkah. We caused them so much service, so much trouble, that they decided to cut a deal. They cut us loose. We weren't worth their investment and their effort. Translate that into Vietnam. Did the superpower United States of America lose Vietnam because it couldn't win? No. We decided not to win because it wasn't worth the price that we were paying, and nobody saw the purpose in it, so we left. It is possible that the rebellion against Rome by a united people of Israel, the Jewish people, could have caused Rome enough service that they could have cut a deal. This was a reasonable thought. But they were seeking total victory, complete victory over Rome, complete sovereignty, rejecting Rome from that part of the world. And that was totally unrealistic. So it really wasn't Rome, the rabbis are saying, who defeated us. We defeated ourselves. That provides a solution. If we fix ourselves, if we correct our mistakes, we can bounce back. We can succeed. We can return to our land, regain our sovereignty. So the interpretation of the people of Israel hope. End this senseless, eternal strife and hatred, and you can rebuild, reconstruct, and again rise. What about the end of the covenant? Was this the end of Jewish history? This exile, loss of sovereignty? Remember, the Jewish people on its own land is the whole dream of the Bible. We didn't know how to conceive of a people of Israel not on its own land. So they had to come up with how you're going to survive in exile. So they decided it's not possible that this is the end of the covenant between God and the people of Israel. That was rejected completely. So they came up with a very simple explanation. It's a beautiful midrash. They asked the question, as the temple is burning and the city is being destroyed, and the people going to exile, is the God of Israel going into exile with the Jewish people? Will there be a relationship, a covenant, a presence? And they say that God could not abandon the people of Israel. Why? Because he went with the children of Israel into exile because they were innocent. And how could God ever abandon the children? Well, it's a brilliant explanation because there's always children. And if there's always children, then God can never abandon the people of Israel. So the children maintain the covenant, and the covenant is unbreakable. They preserve the covenant forever. So as long as we have children and educate them, the relationship between God and the people of Israel may be strained, but never ended. And it worked. The focus of the Jewish world, since that moment in history to this very day, is to have children and Jewish education. That's the focus. Just go to Israel. All of Israel is focused around the children. The whole country is built around kids. We never gave up on returning to the land. We maintained the community through children and education for 2,000 years until we could finally return. So the rabbi's interpretation of that tragic event that would have ended most any other nation's existence. No nation has ever returned to its land after thousands of years of exile. We're the only ones in history. It worked. It was a brilliant psychological interpretation that allowed the people of Israel to live a full life in the diaspora, but never lose its connection with the land. So we came back, and we're sovereign now. But so much of the world resents that sovereignty and would quite frankly like to cancel it. So how do we respond using the lessons of Tisha B'Av to October 7th and to our realization that a significant part of the world would like Israel to disappear? By the way, an aside, there's been an argument or discussion in the Jewish world since Israel was reestablished in 48 as to whether we should even have Tisha B'Av. And think about why are we sitting on the ground mourning the destruction of the temples when we can go to the Western world and daven? We can go to the Kotel and celebrate a bar mitzvah. We can visit Jerusalem, and Jerusalem's a united city now. So why are we mourning the destructions of the temple? And the answer really is very clear. The lessons of Tisha B'Av are so vital to preserving the state and to understanding the problems and challenges that Israel faces, and we in the diaspora face as well, with anti-Semitism exploding on the public scene again. Tisha B'Av and its lessons must be taught. So on October 7th, Israel was a divided nation, a radical right-wing government with messianic components, radical nationalists with messianics. If they had looked at Tisha B'Av in history, they would have realized that's a very dangerous combination. Very familiar. God's on our side. We can take on anyone. And that arrogance led to the belief that Hamas wasn't a real serious threat. Just kind of a sideshow, right? JV squad. Remember that one? And the disaster that led to by underestimating ISIS, it cost thousands of lives. Well, Israel, they were calling Hamas the JV squad, and they were wrong. We didn't secure the border at Gaza. We didn't have military assets nearby in any case. In fact, it's now known that Israel had plans how to confront an invasion of 80, 100, 150 terrorists across the border. They had zero plans for what to do if a few thousand crossed the border. It wasn't even thought about. That's arrogance. That's underestimating the enemy. Why didn't we have that plan? Because we were having a fight about the Jewish presence in the West Bank, an internal battle that left us distracted and without a correct focus. Where was the army? West Bank is where the army was. And the hatred of the different political groups in Israel was palpable. Pro-judicial reform, or cutting out the legs from under the Supreme Court, or give the Supreme Court unlimited power. Where were those calling for compromise and reason? The only one was the president. He tried so hard to create a compromise, but there were very few who followed him. The drafting of the Haredim, or a group that thinks it's okay for certain Jews to defend the state while others study or pray, or maybe in actuality do neither, versus the rest of the country that rejected that idea completely. Hundreds of thousands of people demonstrating, but no one sitting down to talk compromise. And there was hatred in the eyes. You could see the hatred between the groups. No search for a compromise. Each side wanted to win completely. The divide between the religious and the secular was growing as the ultra-religious wanted to impose too many restrictions on the secular because they had power now. They had won the Knesset, and they wanted to impose their power. Many of the Jewish Israelis are, in fact, not ultra-religious, and they're not secular. They're what we would call traditionalists. But there was such anger, such hatred, such chinam, no movement to compromise, and we were distracted. On October 7th, we were totally unprepared. We were terribly, horribly, and cruelly bloodied, like never before in Israel's history. The main difference, and this is the most important thing to remember, is that this time, Israel is a superpower. Israel is feared. Israel is like the power of Rome in the Mideast. She cannot and will not be defeated militarily. And the other big difference is that the Roman superpower of today, America, is standing firmly by Israel's side. But Israel must bring this conflict to an end so there can be a return to normalcy. It can't continue. How that happens is a political and military question. But one thing is for sure, only a unified Israel, I don't mean completely unified, but one without hatred and realizing we are all in this together, can Israel possibly return to normalcy and bring an end to this conflict while bringing an end to Hamas and neutralizing Hezbollah. I would say one thing I believe is obvious. Talking about Hamas, talking about Hezbollah is the wrong conversation. It's a complete, total distraction. There's only one word we should mention: Iran. Iran is the complete and total reason behind this conflict. The need to cancel the Taylor Swift concerts because radical Islam wanted to murder him. Interesting enough, not Jews. Who are they going to murder at that concert? 99% were going to be Christians, right? Definitely, there are Jewish fans of Taylor Swift. She's really very talented. But we were in Europe, it's going to be mainly Christians. They wanted to kill Christians and hopefully a few Jews in their mind. That threat faces the Western world, every Western country, until Iranian threat is neutralized. They all work for Iran. They're all supported by Iran. Until Iran is neutralized, this thing doesn't end for Israel. It doesn't end for Europe. It doesn't end for America. As we say, quote unquote, by the grace of God, they uncovered that plot before the concert. If they had failed to uncover the plot, like Secret Service had failed on that day when an ex-president was almost assassinated, if their intelligence had failed the way Secret Service had failed, you understand the disaster that would have been entailed? It was gas. They were using gas. They were going to poison. They were going to kill people with gas. It could have been hundreds, if not thousands, because the concert was sold out. We have to act as if it had succeeded, not just say it didn't succeed. Tisha B'Av tells us that we were very, very vulnerable when we are guilty of baseless hatred. It tells us we have real enemies and we need to know who they are. But unlike Tisha B'Av, we also have great friends, and we need to cultivate them and stop rejecting them. American Jewry is also very divided. Divided on what Zionism means, or what kind of country Israel should be as a Jewish country. Divided on how to deal with the anti-Semitism that has exploded in this country, especially on the college campuses. Divided politically in the most extreme way we've ever seen. The Iran nuclear deal, the Republican-Democratic divide, the left has left us weakened, and we were taken by surprise when the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic explosion happened on the campuses. We were surprised because we were divided and we weren't focused. We should have seen it coming. And a healthy Jewish community would have actually known it was coming. But we failed, and we're still confused and worried. We're organizing, we're having successes in the courts, and we've already had success in helping to eliminate 2 of the members of the squad in Congress. So slowly but surely, a united Jewish people, along with our friends, because we can't do it alone. We're not numerous enough. We can't do it. But if we join together, we can start to have great successes in pushing back on this anti-Semitism, this anti-Zionism. The lesson of Tisha B'Av is that a community that is unified, that respects differences, that focuses on properly educating its children and uniting the Jewish community and embracing our friends, even if we don't agree with them on other issues, is a community, a country that cannot be defeated, cannot be seriously harmed. It's good that we still have Tisha B'Av because it's a very strong reminder of what can go wrong when you're not unified. And it teaches us through its lessons how we can make sure it doesn't go wrong next time. Shabbat Shalom. I hope you join us for Tisha B'Av Monday night as we will chant the 5 chapters of the Book of Lamentations and think about the lessons of those disastrous days in Jewish history.